Hey guys, welcome in this new video. So today I want to show you how to create some bubbles in Tube without any simulation in Houdini. So here I have a new blank scene in Houdini, and the first step is to add a new geometry node. So here you can dive inside and you can go into the front view by pressing space 3 on the keyboard. So here the first step is to create our tube and our path. So to do that you can use the curve polygons tools. Curve polygon selected, you can select this icon and you can enable the snap on the grid, and here you can just define a quick path. So in my case I will just make something like this. So here I have a curve, but you can change it as you want, and maybe we can create some bevels on the hard corner here. So to do that you can use the poly bevel node. And here with the poly bevel you can simply press P to open the parameter. You can select all the points here, so put a star, and here for the group type you can select points, and you can just increase the distance here. So maybe I will put the value at 0.125. So here I will change the division to something like 6, and here I can add a resample node. So in that case I can create more even points on the curve, because for now I have that, and with the resamples I have more even points on my curve. So here I can change the value at something like 0.05, and here I can change the type to subdivision curve, and I can enable my curve view attribute. So here we can add a null to specify this is the end of our curve. So you can rename it something like out curve. So now we can create a tube based on that. So to do that you can use the sweep node. And here with the first sweep node, you can just select round tube here. So here with the sweep, I will keep everything by default here, but maybe I will go back into the bevel node and I will increase the bevel here, because you can see we have some issue here on the corner. So I will increase the value on the poly bevels, and maybe I will put the distance at something like 0.2 or maybe 0.25. So now we have our first geometry, but let's add a bit more polygon to it. So to do that, you can go into the resample node and you can divide this value by 2. So I can make the value at 0.025, and here I can go back into the sweep and I can increase the column to something like 16. So now I have more polygons into my sweep. So now I can duplicate this node by clicking on Alt and left click, and here with the second sweep I can just define a profile by changing the scale along the curve here. So I can enable these options, and here you can just define a profile for your tube here. So first let's increase the global radius to something like 0.25, and here you can just define your profile with this graph, and maybe we can go for something like this. Like this. So here I will speed up the video and I will define my own profile, but in your case you can define your own profile based on your needs. So here I will just speed up and see the result after. So here I have defined a profile in my case for this specific example. So if you want, you can select all the value here and you can change the interpolations. So here instead of linear, maybe we can make it on monotone cubic. So I think it will be a bit more smooth here, but it's up to you. So now we have our two sweeps. The first one is this one and the second one is the straight one. So now we have to create some bubbles and move the bubbles along our curve here. So to do that, let's add a polyframe node. So here on the polyframe, you can just replace the tangent with our normal. So you can disable the normals and you can replace the tangent name by our normals. So now we can add a curve node. And here is a curve, you can just click on extract and keep point. So in that case, you can keep only one point on our curve. So here we have our curve and we have the point extracted here. And with the curve node, you can just change this value to move the points along our curve. So here we can create one curve node first, but later we can duplicate this node to create multiple bubbles. So here let's add a copy 2 points. Let's plug the point into the second input of the copy 2 points, and let's add a sphere. And here let's plug the spheres into the first input of the copy 2 points. So now we have that. So maybe we can change it from polygon mesh to polygons, and here we can increase the frequency to something like 12. And you can also change the radius if you want, so maybe you can decrease it just a bit to something like 0.3, and you can increase the radius on the z-axis to something like 0.75 or maybe 0.5. So now to deform our bubbles based on this geometry, you can use the lattice node. So let's add the lattice. So here for the lattice, we have to plug the bubbles into the first input. we have to put the rest geometry into the second input. And here we have to put the deformed geometry into the last input of the lattice. So here on the parameter, you can just change it to points. And here on the lattice, you can play with the radius here, and you can play with the model. So maybe you can make this one, and here you can just play with the radius based on your animations. So maybe in my case, I can decrease it just a bit to 0.15. And here you can also play with the size of your bubble. So here in the spheres parameter, you can just change the uniform scale, or you can change the radius if you want on the X, Y, and Z axis. So maybe I can decrease it just a bit to something like 0.7 maybe. And here you can also play with the radius of the two sweeps. So the first one is a straight one and the second one is a deformed one. So here I found a good value in my case. So here for the sphere, you can see I have just changed the uniform scale a bit. So I increase also the frequency. So if you have more polygon, you can deform a bit more the bubbles. So here you can play with the frequency also. Here into the lattice, I change the radius to something like 0.1, and here for the sweep, I change the radius to 0.12, and here I've increased the radius at 0.3. So I think it's pretty much it for this particular case. And here in the curve, you can just change the value of the curve node, and you can see the bubble will be deformed based on our tube. And here maybe you can get some issue, something like that, something very, very straight on our bubbles. So here you can add an attribute blur after the lattice. And here with the attribute blur, maybe you can just keep everything by default. You can increase the step size to 1, and here you can increase the blurring iteration to something like 5 instead of 1. And here you can see it's a bit more clean for our bubbles. So I think that's it. So now you can add normals, and you can put the normals on our points. And here, if you want, you can add a peak node to get more or less inflations on our bubbles. So here you can just change the distance based on your needs. So I think in my case, I can increase it to something like 0.01. And I think it will be pretty good like that. So now we have 1 bubbles on our tube. So let's duplicate the curve node to create 3 bubbles for this specific example. So here we can make the first one here. Let's duplicate with Alt and left click, and one more time. And here for the curve, you can just copy the value of the first one. So right click, copy parameter. And here you can go into the second one, paste relative reference. And the third one, paste relative reference. And now we can add a null to add some offset for the curve number 2 and number 3. So here we can rename the null something like offset controller. So here you can go into the null, you can click on the gear icon here, and you can click on edit parameter interface. So you can make these 2 invisibles, and you can click on apply, and here you can drop 1 float and 2 floats. So the first one will be our offset 1, and the second one will be our offset 2. So now you can copy the offset 1, right click, copy parameter, and you can add this value to the curve 2. So here you can go into the first U here, you can add a plus, and you can right click, paste relative reference. And now you can do absolutely the same for the curve number 3. So you can copy the offset 2 value here, right click, copy parameter, and you can go into the curve number 3. So you can add a plus to add an offset value to this curve. So paste relative reference. So now you can go here, you can add the first one to something like 0.1 for examples, and the second one to 0.2. And here you can select the 3 curve, you can merge them together. And here you can plug the merge into the second input of the copy 2 points. And now you can see we have 3 bubbles, but of course it's better to add different value here. Maybe you can make this one at something like 0.25 or maybe 0.5. And the third one to something like 0.175. And now you can see we have different value here, and you can animate this one. So here you can add a keyframe at 0 for this one, and you can add a keyframe at the frame 96, and you can add the value at 1 for examples. So in that case, the bubbles will travel all our tubes, and you can see we have this result. So now if you want, you can remove the point on the bubbles below the floor here. So to do that, let's add an attribute wrangles. And here you can just type if at p.y is below 0, we can remove our points. So let's add the remove point functions. And here you can just type 0 for the first input and add ptnum. So now you can see I have removed the points of the sphere below 0. So now if you need, you can add a smooth node. And here you can smooth the position of our bubble. So here you can just change the filter quality or increase the strength. Maybe you can increase to something like 200 or maybe 500. And I think it will be pretty good like that. So now if you want to create some bubbles with a tube, with glass tube, you can just reverse the normal. So to do that, let's add a reverse node. And in that case, it will be seen as bubbles if you are using glass for the tube. So here you can just add a null to specify this is the end of our bubbles. So let's rename something like render bubbles. And here we have the tube for rendering. So here maybe we can add a subdivide node. And you can subdivide a bit more. And here you can add a null to specify this is the end of our tube. But maybe you can add a poly extrude node first. So let's add the poly extrude. So here for the distance, I will make something very small. So maybe we can put the distance at something like 0.025, something like that. And you can click on output backs. And now you can plug that into the nulls and you can rename the null something like render tube. So now we have our two objects, the tube and the bubbles, and we can render them like this. So we can add a glass material to our tube and we can add another glass material with our bubbles. And with the reverse normals, it will be seen as bubbles. That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check artivoxer.com to get premium 3D resources. See you in the next one. Bye.